who should be worried? We've got a Cuban man who came to the U.S. in the early 1970s, I think. They arrested him. He was 65 years old, 85 years old, and he died. Um, is this kind of thing happening right now where people with green cards are being detained, citizens are being detained, and why isn't it getting any more attention?
Yeah, well, I think cases like that have started to get attention and have broken through. Actually, I think that's why there's been some shift in public opinion. Um, that case is not unique. He had that gentleman had, I believe, a very old controlled substance crime. I
Mm,
know of cases here recently as well. I can't go into too much detail. Similarly, you know, someone's older relative who, the family had forgotten that they had a controlled substance violation in the 80s. Immigration never forgets. And even for all the harshness of our criminal justice system, there's a bit more actually room for people to put their lives to get back together and live, really admirable lives. And often I feel like, gosh, if the worst thing you've ever done in your life is that you possessed cocaine in 1983,
right,
I'd like to emulate you maybe, but
right.
immigration won't forgive you for that, and so that is not at all unique. And in terms, you asked though, who is in danger,
Yeah.
and look, eventually we all are. And I work with a lot of in our line of work a lot of black humor, so we can all rate ourselves, right? So I
Mhm.
am like um, a straight white guy, so no points for risk for me, except that I'm Jewish and fairly outspoken on immigration, so I get some risk factor for that.
Mhm.
If I were gay, we probably add another point to
Mhm.
for me. But the people I'm most risk now are obviously anyone with any kind of insecure immigration status. I can parse that, but I think we have to look at basically any Latino probably should be a bit nervous, right? Because they are getting um, increasingly targeted, right? There are more and more cases, and especially Latinos who are in close relationship with people with more insecure immigration status. And that's really relevant in Las Vegas because we're a mixed status town, right? A
Mhm.
huge percentage of our families have multiple immigration statuses under one
So
roof.
so what you're saying is kids who are citizens and their parents are not citizens, the kids can get deported too?
Yes, also spouses, but also just colleagues and friends, because more and more of the ICE arrests we're seeing are guys going to work, right? And the pickup truck gets pulled over. And it's possible in that pickup truck you've got multiple immigration statuses, but they all might fit a common ethnic stereotype. The friends, right? Because like the more you have more of these sort of raids on where people congregate, like what's happened in Southern California,
Mhm.
um, and a little bit here, basically just people who are hanging out together are um, especially if they're Latino, right? So like a bunch of, because then you're asking the ICE officer to tell different Mexicans apart, right? And
Mm.
I'm not sure I have confidence in that happening, and so that can lead to being harassed, lead to being questioned. It can lead to being arrested for several hours, and it can lead to worse than that. And just to illustrate, the risk that we're living in, the racial risk. Right? I have always said, look, mass deportations are always racial deportations. We've had
Yes.
two previously. I think we are beginning a third in American history. The previous two, they've always targeted Mexicans, and the previous two in the 20th century deported as many U.S. citizens as non-U.S. citizens, and I don't expect that to be too different. So Laura
So
Loomer,
when were the previous 2 for
the
our
previous
our
two
our
was
viewers?
first of all Operation Wetback under Eisenhower,
Oh my
and
god, wow.
that's sorry for the word. I usually give a
Yeah, yeah,
super
no,
movie
no.
but that was what it was called. And under President Eisenhower, that's actually the one that President Trump said it's the record he wants to break. He said that repeatedly during the campaign, which is part of why, for me, like this was always clear how we would go because he said that's his model, that's the record he wants to break, and they deported a ton of U.S. citizens. The one before that was under Hoover. Started under Hoover, especially in Southern California. They just loaded Mexican people onto trains and buses and sent them to Mexico, and they just grabbed people based on stereotypes, no due process for the most part, and they deported a lot of U.S. citizens. Um, this one is not only targeting Mexicans, but they're certainly included. Um, so yeah, it's mass
Anyone with brown
deportations are
skin who
racial
speaks
deportations.
Spanish, that's who they're
Yeah.
targeting.
Yeah,
And
and
then
like
people who speak
not
out.
speaking English or speaking English with an accent are probably risk factors if you want to go back to the score sheet I was talking about.
A few months ago, I heard, about, uh, somebody being picked up because who works at a hotel, and, one of the security guards at the hotel turned this guy in, and he was born here. He was a citizen. His mother had to go to the Henderson Detention Center with his birth certificate to get him out. How often is that happening? And um, how okay, there's just so many questions in that, right? Like the security guard where he works turned him in, which is highly problematic, right? And how often is it that people actually they believe the birth certificate and they let the kid out, they let the guy out?
There are cases, this happened. I'm going to look something up for you here. When the um, back in the first Trump administration, where they picked up people who they had early notice were, first of all, they picked them up based on profiling. They had early notice this person was a citizen, and still the person was detained for weeks. And because they're fortunate that just bringing the birth certificate to the jail let them out. But if the jail, I don't know what happened there, but the
Mhm.
jail easily could say, well, we just follow orders from ICE, and ICE doesn't pick up the phone. And then you have to go to get a lawyer, and it's hard to get a court date. So there is was recently a government report. This is, again, a federal government study that from 2015 to 2020, ICE deported at least 70 US citizens. That's actually going through the full deportation.
Mm.
Um, and the for every citizen they deported, they actually arrested about 10 more. So
And
that's
how is it that you can deport US citizens? What did they do?
it is very important to understand when people ask like how could this happen. It's important to understand this at the most basic functional level, right? It goes back to what I was saying before about regulating the government. At some level, a law enforcement officer is just a man with a gun. And if there are several men with guns, and if they also have some vehicles, a jail or two, and an airplane, then they can deport
Uh,
you. So
mhm.
how do they do it? They point a gun at you, they shackle you, and they put you on a plane. That's how it's done.
So it's not, it
What
wasn't done
you're really
legally.
asking is how could this happen
Right.
legally? And it can't. Like by definition, it cannot be legal. But we have very inadequate, even in the normal system, we have very inadequate checks to prevent those kind of errors. That is when we talk about due process, this is what we're talking about, right? It's
Mhm.
the equivalent in medicine of the safeguards to prevent the administration of the wrong medication that can kill someone in a hospital. And they have elaborate checks to that are supposed to prevent that, still not 100%. That is what due process is for regulating the powers of the government. And of course, now, though, they are working very hard to avoid even the normal due process, which